What's up, Taiwan? I'm Louise with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. China's Coast Guard says it acted within the law when it detained a Taiwanese fishing boat in waters off Jinmen on Tuesday night. But Taiwan is pouring doubt on that motive, suggesting politics is behind it. The 5 crew members, a mix of Taiwanese and Indonesian nationals, remain in Chinese custody. Reese Ayres is following the story for us from Taipei. Reese, what are you hearing?
Well, in a post on Chinese social media platform Weibo, China's Coast Guard has said that they were just acting in accordance with the law when they detained a Taiwanese fishing vessel on Tuesday night, which had, in fact, we've confirmed, crossed into Chinese territorial waters. They also said that the boat was fishing illegally. It was breaking a summertime ban on fishing in the area and also apparently using illegal fishing nets. Now, the Taiwanese side has recognized that the boat had crossed into Chinese waters, but Taiwan's Director of National Security, Tsai Ming-yen, has said that it's quite unusual for a fishing boat to be detained in this way, questioning China's motives for such a heavy-handed response to what was probably just a mistake. He's also warned of any other fishing vessels operating in the area to proceed with caution. Now, the United States has also weighed in on this issue, with White House spokesperson Karine Jean-Pierre saying that the U.S. continues to monitor this situation closely. And when asked if the U.S. had reached out for Taiwan to offer its support, she had this to say.
Well, I don't have any calls, obviously, to speak to at this time, but we encourage both sides to maintain open lines of communication so they can get to a resolution here, and that's what we call for.
Now, the two sides are apparently communicating through cross-strait communication channels, but there hasn't been any indication yet as to when those 5 fishers might be released. And remember, China is still holding another Taiwanese fisher that it detained way back in March, adding to concerns that it's civilians that are being used as pawns in an increasingly tense political game.
Thanks for the details, Reese. That was Reese Ayres reporting from Taipei. And we'll keep following this story. Tune in later to TaiwanPlus News for any updates. The Defense Ministry says it spotted 30 Chinese military aircraft and 8 naval ships operating around Taiwan. 19 of those aircraft crossed the median line of the Taiwan Strait and entered the country's air defense identification zone on Wednesday. This zone is not Taiwan's sovereign airspace, but is used by the military for defensive purposes. The Defense Ministry says it deployed its own aircraft, vessels, and coastal missile systems in response. China and Russia will only get closer, according to their leaders. Here's what Chinese President Xi Jinping said at a regional summit in Central Asia.
双方要继续秉持世代友好的初心，坚守造福人民的恒心，不断涵养中俄关系的独特价值，挖掘两国合作的内生动力。
The two leaders met at the annual Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in Kazakhstan, where they discussed trade and security in Central Asia and the wider region. It's their second meeting since Putin visited Beijing in May. The EU is set to confirm a plan that will place provisional tariffs on Chinese electric car imports. It follows an investigation into alleged subsidies that have allowed Chinese companies to make cheap EVs. But not all European governments are on board with the tariffs. Joyce Sung reports.
Protecting automakers in Europe in the form of additional tariffs on Chinese-built electric vehicles. It comes despite efforts from both the European Commission and Beijing to strike a deal. Provisional duties of up to 37.6% on top of its standard 10% car tariff will add billions of dollars in new costs for Chinese brands like BYD, Geely, and SAIC. It's the result of the bloc's largest trade case against China, launched last year by Commission head Ursula von der Leyen, which concluded Chinese EV makers weren't playing by global trade rules and were benefiting from unfair subsidization.
as we've seen for the past years, China has failed to address those grievances that the EU has raised, in particular in market access and excessive subsidies. So this is what led to the Commission to really step up its game to protect European interests and European competitiveness.
But not all member states are on the same page. France is among one of the strongest backers, while Germany wants Brussels to drop the tariffs, as German car makers fear retaliation from Beijing. A third of their sales last year were in the Chinese market. German Economy Minister Robert Habeck recently went to Shanghai to maintain good relations with his Chinese counterparts.
What I suggested to my Chinese partners today, that the doors are open for discussions. And I hope that this message was heard. Tariffs are only the ultima ratio. I don't want them, and I hope nobody in Europe wants the tariffs.
While EU members will still have the chance to voice concerns about the future of these tariffs in the coming weeks, they're not the only ones worried by Beijing's cheap EVs. Turkey and Brazil are also going ahead with their own tariff plans on Chinese EV imports, while Indonesia is set to impose up to 200% tariffs on Chinese goods to counter dumping. The Southeast Asian nation has just launched its first EV battery plant, aiming to leverage its large reserves of materials like nickel to claim its own stake in the emerging industry.
Kemudian masuk ke EV baterai. Kemudian pabrik mobilnya ada di sini. Terintegrasi dalam sebuah ekosistem. Untuk mobil listrik, siapa yang bisa menghadang kita kalau kondisinya sangat kompetitif seperti itu?
Notably, U.S. President Joe Biden has slapped on a 100% tariff, effectively making it unprofitable for Chinese EV makers to sell to the United States. Trade analysts say Washington has learned its lesson, having previously waited until domestic industry was damaged by surges in Chinese imports, but that their hardline approach this time could impact trade relations with other countries.
This is going to make the trade landscape even more uncertain, because if the United States, for example, does not allow into our country, let's just say Chinese vehicles that are being made in Thailand, we may find ourselves having some trade friction with Thai authorities.
With potential to redraw global trade maps, economists are watching for Beijing's reaction. In the EU's case, China could up tariffs on European pork, cognac, or luxury cars. But with negotiations still on the table, all will depend on how much Beijing is willing to compromise and how far the Commission is willing to go to protect European interests. Scott Huang and Joyce Zinn for TaiwanPlus.
Despite these tariffs coming into force, Chinese President Xi Jinping has affirmed his intent to develop relations with the EU in a phone call with incoming European Council President Antonio Costa. Chinese state media quoted Xi as saying, "China has always regarded Europe as an important pole in the multipolar order." It's election day in the United Kingdom, where voters will elect a new parliament. If the polls are right, the result is likely to bring an end to more than a decade of Conservative Party rule. Chris Gorin reports.
After 14 years of Conservative governments, the UK seems poised for a change. British voters are heading to the polls to levy judgment on the Conservative Party's governance over what's been a rocky period for the country.
We've had quite a lot of change over the past few years, with not just in terms of prime ministers from Johnson to Truss to Sunak, but we've had Brexit dominating so much of the debate for so long, then the COVID pandemic and the economic fallout from that, combined with the war in Ukraine.
Current Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is the 5th Conservative Prime Minister in the past 8 years. One of them, Liz Truss, lasted just 44 days in office. Pre-election polls show that the opposition Labour Party could win a majority, even a possible landslide, potentially getting more than 419 seats out of 632, which would be the most seats ever won by a single party in the country's history. The man who would lead that majority is Labour leader Keir Starmer. A former lawyer and head of the UK's prosecutorial service, he's made change his campaign slogan.
We've now had 14 years of chaos, of division and failure, and the choice tomorrow is to bring that to an end, to turn the page and start to rebuild with Labour.
But his approval ratings are much lower than his party's expected majority, indicating voters are angry at conservatives more than they are excited about Starmer. Starmer has run on a platform of investing in public services and increasing economic growth. The UK's post-pandemic economy has grown more slowly than both the US and Eurozone as a whole, having the second slowest recovery among the G7, a grouping of the world's most industrialized countries. Many view this as a consequence of the conservative-led Brexit, when Britain voted to leave the European Union. Even in places like Skegness, which had among the highest number of Leave votes and is now struggling economically, some have buyer's remorse.
Well, it was 75%, I think, roughly, that voted to leave. And a lot of people are disappointed with the Brexit we've got. If the vote happened again and we were going to get this Brexit, I don't think people would vote for it.
But it may be that what British voters are really looking for is stability, and a majority win for Labour is expected to give them that. For more than a decade, the only constant at 10 Downing Street has been its infamous chief mouser, Larry. If the polls are proven right, Larry the cat will soon be welcoming a new housemate. The question is, can he last? Chris Ma and Chris Gorin for TaiwanPlus.
At least 6 people have been killed in the latest floods to hit northern India and Bangladesh. Torrential rains have triggered landslides and floods in the border region, home to some 1.3 million people. Among the dead was a Rohingya refugee housed in an aid camp. Scientists say glaciers melting in the Himalayas has made 2 major rivers in the region more likely to burst. Taiwan's railway union says that 8 workers who are facing punishment over a train derailment are being made scapegoats. John Van Trieste reports.
This train still bears the scars of a collision with boulders that caused it to derail 2 weeks ago. Dazed passengers were left to walk out into the rugged terrain of Taiwan's east coast. 9 were injured. Taiwan's state-owned railway company now says more should have been done. It's rewarding 4 employees, including the conductor, for their actions, and punishing 8 others for negligence. One of the stiffest punishments is going to a worker charged with monitoring security cameras. A camera overlooking the accident site captured the flood that dragged the boulders onto the tracks as it happened, 19 minutes before the train crashed into the fallen rocks. But no one warned the crew there was danger ahead.
发生这个事情的那个当下，他人是在里面。他自述呢，就是他在里面有做监看，但是他没有注意到那2个荧幕，他的确没有看到，所以他也没有反应跟通报。
The company's chair has asked to be punished as well. But the railway union disputes the idea that the people monitoring the cameras were negligent.
这些第一线的员工是在一个有非常多几十甚至到上百的荧幕前面在进行监控的。等到就是收到了相关气象单位或者是监测单位的通知，我们公路段的同仁才会特别针对该路段去进行监控。台铁的这个杜董事长不要因为自己要政治负责，连带拉基层员工下水。
As the rail company hands out rewards and punishments, it's also taking steps to prevent similar accidents. By the end of the month, it expects to dredge streams along the tracks, have 2 people monitoring the camera at the accident site 24/7, and set up a landslide warning system nearby. Other work, like shoring up vulnerable mountain slopes, may be done by the end of the year. But eastern Taiwan's mountains are prone to landslides, especially after recent earthquakes and heavy rains. A rockslide Thursday morning put more boulders on the rail line that runs through the east, a demonstration of how hard a task the railroad company has ahead of it. Justin Wu and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow our social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, we'll leave you with an art and football exhibition at a museum in Germany. It coincides with Euro 2024 and has works representing all 24 nations taking part. I'm Louise Watt. Take care. We'll see you next time.